Welcome to Spider-Verse Minute, the tri-weekly podcast where we watch Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse 1 minute at a time. I'm Caroline Slater.
And I'm her brother Sean.
And today we are discussing Minute 78. It begins with Peter comforting Miles, and ends a minute later with Miles tucking in Genki.
What did you title this minute?
We've all been there.
Yeah, and for Peter and Gwen, it was almost an identical situation to Miles's, where so Miles, his uncle, he feels kind of responsible for his uncle dying here. So feeling wise, it was almost identical. With Peter's, it was his Uncle Ben and him not going to stop the mugger, and not using his powers. And for Gwen, it was her best friend trying to become like her and kind of become like her, and ends up accidentally hurting him, and the serum not doing good things to him and him dying. And like in Gwen's case, like both of them get confused for the murder of their loved ones. Like when they're like, we're probably the only ones that know what it's like. Peter and Gwen most definitely. I don't know, like I imagine Pennies and Spider Noirs and Spider Hams are very, very similar.
We actually don't. This is a little going ahead, but I just really want to point this out since you brought up Spider Ham. He actually doesn't say whose his is.
Yeah, they used to have a line in there that that was like done for comedic purposes that they cut out. And the line used to be, "My Uncle Frankfurter got electrocuted. He smelled delicious." And, it got huge. Like, I guess they were saying it was like being played really well, like with their tests, and like getting a big laugh, but it just like tonally it didn't fit in this moment.
Yeah, it doesn't.
And so it was just a little bit too much of a slapstick joke. And I guess it was also causing, like, he was a bit too funny man all the time and not really like injecting in the at the right moments, and so people weren't liking him as a character because he was sort of seen as this kind of naggy kind of guy.
Yeah, and there's this minute and this scene in particular I love because they show Spider-Ham so well in both as his more serious moment and a great comedic moment later.
Yeah.
But we'll get to that. I don't want to get to that one yet because I want to talk about the serious stuff first.
Yeah.
There is a small joke that they do. A very small one where Peter is like, yeah, we've all been there. For me, it was my Uncle Ben. Spider-Noir rests his hand on Miles. For me, it was my Uncle Benjamin. Which always got a chuckle out of me.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie, I'm like
they're so similar.
It's like, it's funny. But it never ruined the moment. It was just like a nice little, like, they need to pick me up.
Yeah.
Have this line here.
And like, it was kind of interesting how Gwen said it was her best friend.
Yeah.
Instead of saying like, hey, it was my Peter.
Yeah, like,
my
do you
best
think
friend
she did
Peter.
that because she's like, we don't need to know how many Peters have died in other dimensions.
And Penny going towards, like, Penny then just saying like, oh yeah, it was my father. But yeah, like, we don't know how. I imagine Pennies and Spider Noirs and Spider Hams are similar, I said, but just knowing from at least personally knowing from the comics history and what they told in their flashbacks, like, yeah, Peter's and Gwen's are very similar.
I do want to ask you this: how do you think they found out about his Uncle Aaron?
They probably heard on
Do you think like they heard the
radio,
something?
And potentially, like, saw something. I also imagine this was not quite a bit later, but like enough later that some news reports potentially, or something like that, or they might have even passed him on the way. Like if Miles was sort of heading back in the direction of Visions, like in the general direction, they might have passed that and seen
Visions
that as well.
Visions is in Brooklyn. and they were in Queens, so they wouldn't have passed him if he was headed back to Brooklyn.
What do you mean?
Well, Queens is more uptown, and Brooklyn is as downtown as you can get.
Yeah, but going from Aunt May's house, like if the death happened between Aunt May's house and Vision's, and like Miles was heading in that direction when he was carrying Uncle Aaron, they might have passed the scene on the way there.
Oh, you were saying past. I thought you said they passed Miles. Okay, my bad.
No,
I misunderstood what you were saying.
No.
Then okay. Then yeah, most likely.
Yeah. Maybe heard it on the radio or the news or something.
Okay, I was just curious what you thought it would have been.
Yeah. I was kind of along those lines as how they found Miles's room. Like, do you think they just showed up to Vision's and Gwen was like, I know he goes here, but and then they just saw like the book fly out the window and they're like, oh, that's where it is, and quickly scrambled up. Or were they able to hiding just under a bunch of windows, like trying to listen, be like, nope, not this one. Like you just see a bunch of them crawling along, trying to peek in, and that just happened to be the next one that they were going to take a look at.
Here's what happened. Gwen broke into...
Yeah.
Going back on a more serious note, this is one of the lines that they gave to Spider-Ham to play the more serious moment, and I love that they did it. So he wasn't all jokes and giggles. And shout out to John Mulaney for delivering this line so well as well. Is when Spider-Ham says, the hardest part about this job is you can't always save everybody. That's just such a good line. It's a heartbreaking line, but it's such a good line.
Yeah, and it's very similar to one of the alt scenes that we had talked about earlier, right after Miles left the cave and like Peter went to go talk to him on the billboard. Peter has a similar sentiment about like you're not able to always save everybody, but like pick someone that you like, pick your number one person and like just focus on them, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And try to use that to help you move forward. And like, as things get hard, like you're not going to save everybody, but if you're able to focus on, instead of trying to save everybody, try to save this one person, then that's how you're able to bear this weight. And here it's kind of flip-flopped where like it's just you're not always gonna, it's flip-flopped in that instead of don't focus on everybody but focus on an individual. This is kind of, while you're focusing on that individual, just realize like it doesn't always work out.
Yeah. And I just want to say, I love that they gave the line to Spider-Ham and not like Peter or someone. For starters, it does take the comforting role not away from Peter, but it doesn't rely solely on him.
Yeah. It shows that everybody in the group has something to contribute instead of it just being like Peter and the Merry Fellows.
Yeah, it's like it's Peter and Gwen and everyone else. And it also just feels like they all do care about Miles being a good Spider-Man.
Yeah.
Like, it's not just like, well, they don't think he's going to be a good Spider-Man, so they're not really going to try. Like, it's them showing him, like, it's not easy. Like, they're almost, like, preparing him in a way. And I like that it's from another character besides Peter or Gwen.
Yeah, I agree.
Mm-hmm. And then you brought up Gwen's line later where Miles says, like it's my fault, like you wouldn't understand. And he brought it up, and I want to bring it up again. I love Gwen's line of like, Miles, we're probably the only ones who do understand. And it's just another great line.
Yeah, it's really just like, you can tell she's saying that from the heart, like she clearly remembers. Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's almost like as she says that, she's transported back to the reason that she's able to say that.
Yeah, the animators do a great job for like each person showing that like they all went back to that moment, like they all remember it clearly. Even with Spider-Ham when he was saying his line, like you could tell he remembered his moment. And then, bless the writers for deciding to give our hearts a break. It's time for comedy.
I really like the way Start a Riot just like the door jingles and then that music kicks in.
Yeah.
And it I really like how it turns into this like diegetic music of kind of explaining why Genki doesn't hear anything as he's just got these loud headphones on, and like it starts out as just like normal soundtrack music, but then at the first cut it's like, oh, you're actually able to hear that in the room coming from his headphones.
Yeah. It's like, oh, he just has his music on really loud. The other thing is that I love this song just in general, but I remember the first time I listened to it, like when I was just listening to the soundtrack, it's kind of jarring because it's like the only song on the album that is like this.
Yeah, it's got a much heavier electronic influence than the rest of the soundtrack, like electronic dance.
It's a very aggressive sound.
Yeah.
It's a very aggressive sound, and none of the other songs have an aggressive sound. They might have some aggressive lyrics, and they might be aggressive in sort of that sense, but it doesn't have an aggressive sound. So this one is so jarring sometimes when I'm listening to the soundtrack. I'm like, oh yeah, this is nice. And then it just gets aggressive, and I'm like, oh gosh. Sometimes that's what I need. I love this song. Going back to the minute, I also, coming back, I love that the music's so loud that you can hear it through his headphones. And then everyone's just hiding on the ceiling.
Yeah.
Like all hunched together.
Penny is kind of like just jammed in between. Like it just looks like she's being held up by Gwen and Miles.
I think that's kind of what it is.
Yeah, and then like Spider-Ham just kind of like crawls around the back of them, going from one side to the other.
She's like, over there. Back.
Although I was wondering why they didn't go outside and instead went onto the ceiling. Like I feel like it would have been
just like the closest for some reason. I don't think they had enough time to get everybody out. It's a small window, and
yeah, that's probably what it was. It was just quicker to just jump onto the ceiling. There was enough room for all of them to do it at once and then clump up instead of like trying to scramble out the door.
Yeah. I love when Genki finally looks up. Miles just kind of casually goes, "Hey there."
Yeah.
And then Peter Porker, Spider-Ham, and this is why I love the scene for Spider-Ham specifically. We had a serious line, now here's his comedically genius line, which might be my favorite line of his ever, which is, "Do animals talk in this dimension? Because I don't want to freak him out."
Yeah.
Like, and then just Genki fainting. Now, my question is, do you think Genki fainted because there was just a group of spider people on his ceiling, or because Spider-Ham spoke?
So I think it's because there's a group of spider people on his ceiling, because the comic that he's reading is it's titled "Imagine That There Was More Than One Spider-Man," and so so it's pretty much like he's reading this and then suddenly it's on his ceiling.
It's like, oh god.
And yeah, and so he's reading it. It's it's great. It's the covers, it doesn't look like it's a parody of any specific Marvel had their What If series, which in this universe is Imagine That, but like some of them were involving Spider-Man, where what if Spider-Man had joined the Fantastic Four. There's some involving like, oh, what if he didn't marry MJ, or if he married Black Cat, and then just other ones in general are the that you might have heard of recently was what if Jane Foster was Thor.
Yeah.
That one came up fairly in the past couple of years. It's come up again. And so they just have these little one-off stories of just like, what if this was true? And so it's kind of funny. He's pretty much reading the book about the movie that he's in.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense to him. If that's the case, then it's like, oh, that's definitely it then.
Yeah. I like the idea that like the people he's reading about in there are like
just slightly different than the ones in here.
Yeah, or even like kind of the same. Like, oh, there's a a noir one, or a like it's kind of the
Instead
same
of
ones.
Spider Pig, it's Spider Cow or something.
Yeah. It looks like we get a brief moment. So we see the back cover of it, and it looks like there's a very like Hulkish looking one, a very muscular, spider person. There's one that kind of looks like when I first saw her, it reminded me of just Spider Woman, Jessica Drew. It's a little different. The costume's a little different, but that's the one I thought of. And then there's one in a black suit, which reminds me of a dark version. I can't think of what the name is. I guess kind of the symbiote suit, but not as symbiote-y.
Okay.
Or like the kind of night monkey sort of suit from Far From Home.
Yeah.
And then we see Genki like pull down to look at it, and then it cuts from like his kind of point of view to pull it down, and that's when the group is revealed. And inside we see a like Spider-Woman in blue, who I'm not entirely sure if that's someone. And then there's a Spider-Man with a luchador mask on, and like Spider-Man tattooed. Like his costume is pretty much like the tattoos, and so he's got a big spider tattooed on his chest, and Spider-Man tattooed from like shoulder to shoulder. And that kind of reminds me of a mix between the like punk Spider-Man, and I think there was a Mexican influenced Spider-Man, and this one like he's wearing a luchador mask, so I think they kind of maybe smashed the two together. And yeah, so it is kind of funny. He's reading about what if there was multiple spider people. He looks up and he sees there's multiple spider people, and one of them's his roommate.
Fantastic. I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah. The last thing I had was did you take note of Penny's face when they were spotted?
Just how like guilty she looks.
Yeah, I just thought it was adorable, and I'm like, oh, Penny.
I also really like Gwen and Peter's faces, as they both look like, don't look up here, like, like, we've been caught.
You don't see us.
Yeah.
And again, Spider-Ham's line, do animals talk in this world? Because I don't want to freak him out. It's like, this is not the time to ask that, because if they don't, guess what? You just freaked. I love Spider-Ham. Did you have anything else for the minute?
The last thing I wanted to just say was it's very nice of Miles to tuck in Genki.
Very sweet. A nice bro moment. Even though they're not bros yet, but it's a nice bro moment.
Yeah.
We appreciate good bro moments.
Yeah, that was everything I had for this minute. So thank you for joining us this week. If you wanted to reach out to us, you can find us on Twitter at SpiderverseMin, MIN, or you can contact us on Facebook, Instagram, or YouTube at Spiderverse Minute. And if you want to send us an email, you can shoot one on over to podcast@spiderverseminute.com.
Thanks for listening.
Bye.